and she had a kidney transplant done a little over a month ago. And everyone's been praying for her. We just thank you so much, everyone, for praying for Mel. But we've been caring for her here at our home and this past month. So that's why I haven't been in the shows for the last couple of weeks. But I really did miss everyone. I missed being part of the shows and discussing and saying hi to everybody. But yeah, her doctor's appointments happen to be on Wednesdays, especially the last couple of weeks. So we really had to be there with her. She had a minor surgery. Everything went well, though. She's doing awesome. She went back home last week, and she's adjusting to caring for herself at home, but she's doing excellent health-wise. The kidney was a success, so I just wanted to share that awesome news for that prayer request that you guys all really helped out to pray for, and thank you again for praying for Mel. And we just want to thank all the moderators that are here. I see Tammy George in the chat and Brick. Appreciate you guys. And say hi to everybody else who's here. If you guys do have questions for Brother Gary, if you could please put them in the YouTube chat in all capital letters. And my niece, Rihanna Carter, is in the chat. She will be taking the questions. So thank you again, Rihanna, for joining us and for helping me out here. I feel like I have like 3 or 4 different personalities when I'm doing these shows sometimes because there's so many different things to do at once. But it really helps when you guys participate. The moderators do such an excellent job. And welcome back, Rihanna. We haven't seen you for a while, too. I think you've been working on Wednesday evening where you're at. So we just appreciate you, too. And we do have a bunch of questions here that you submitted last month to ask Brother Gary. But if you do have extra or any questions for him, most likely your question will be answered in about a month. In the next show, we do these shows the first Wednesday of every month. And so if you do have a question if you've read Brother Gary's books, oh my goodness, as soon as he comes in, I'm going to have him announce, anything updated. I believe he is working on a 3rd book, which I'm really excited for. I've used his book so many times to teach, and my husband Noble and my son Isaac are actually doing kind of like a men's little study using Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2 because of all the information that's in there about the Nephilim that are actually in the Bible. And there's so much more information on these particular giants that appeared after the flood. I mean, before and after the flood, of course, according to Genesis 6, but especially all the different Canaanite tribes after the flood. And Gary does an excellent job in this book tracing these particular giants, their lineage back, and how a lot of the same names are used before and after the flood, and they tend to name their ancestors after the ancestors that were before the flood. And so he goes into a lot of different possibilities as to how exactly the giants appeared after the flood. We do know from the extra biblicals, like we're reading the Legends of the Jews in Digital Readers Club on Saturdays. If you guys would like to join us for that, it's right here on Zen Garcia YouTube channel every Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we have our Hebrew Hawaiian class fellowship that meets immediately following that at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we have a great time on Saturday evenings with everyone, and we're reading Legends of the Jews. And also Zen actually taught me this of how one of the ways is that the giants could have reappeared after the flood is because of the judgment that was given in the Garden of Eden, and how in order for that to be fulfilled, the Most High had to make sure that somebody on the ark, at least one person, had a very high level of that serpent seed bloodline in the line of Cain, who it started with. And so Legends of the Jews and Writings of Abraham, many other extra biblicals can shed more light on that, exactly how that worked to bring the serpent seed bloodline onto the ark, and then after the flood. We can also find a rundown of that whole story in the book of Lamech of Cain. Describes one of the offspring of Lamech, which was Naamah. In extra biblicals, it describes this particular Naamah as being Noah's second wife and also mother of Ham. So there's a lot of excellent information that we discuss and that I've learned from Zen and also from authors such as Gary Wayne. Just amazing information that we don't get exactly from the Bible. Zen, are you there, brother?
I am. I'm talking to one of the moderators in the chat to try to figure out how to stop listening to the broadcast so that we're not overlapping.
All right, and I did hear back from Gary. He's asking if there's a link that he needs to sign in there, or what I should tell him so he can join us here on Discord, Zen. I told him to go into the Studio B.
Yeah, the Revolution Radio. He should already be part of the platform, and he can just come in and then join the Studio B Live Connect.
Okay, so I'm going to tell him Revolution Radio, Studio B, and then join the Live Connect. Okay, hold on just a second, guys. I'm going to make sure Brother Gary can get in here and join us as well. All right, I sent him that message. So hopefully Brother Gary will be joining us soon. And we are using the Discord platform. It seems to be working pretty well. Zen is working out the last of the kinks here with the radio station so that we can be heard well. If you guys can hear us on YouTube, if we're coming out loud and clear, we really appreciate all the moderators letting us know if we're coming in clear or not. I think we are pretty much. I see some prayer requests in here in the chat. I know Tammy George had requested a prayer request for her son. He is in the hospital right now, so if you guys can please keep him in your prayers. His name is Chris. Anna also is requesting a prayer request for her grandson, Elijah, who is also in the hospital. If you can. To us either by email. You can email me at biblicalhebrewhawaii@gmail.com, and you can submit your prayer request there and then join us on Saturday evenings right after Digital Readers Club. Thank you, Mark, for letting us know that we sound okay. Rick, he's also asking a prayer request for Tristan, who is in the hospital. Okay, okay, good. You can hear me again. Right on. Thank you, Alan, also, and Tammy, for letting me know that you guys can hear us or not. We're still kind of getting used to this new tech here. I'm going to see if I heard back from Gary yet. Hopefully he found that link and he can join us here for his questions. And yes, there is no more echo, Zen, so that's good news. I think it's something with your mic, brother, but I don't hear any echo in the background or anything either. So yeah, I really appreciate all of you guys keeping us posted here, letting us know what's going on. We have quite a few people in the chat already. Right on. Oh, okay, Brick, that's the nickname. Okay, I was wondering who Tristan was. All right, thank you for that. So Chris/Tristan, prayers for him. Anyway, so to go on, we do have a bunch of questions from you guys from last time. We will be asking 3 that we did not get to last month from Daniel Sullivan. Okay, great. Zen is muted, so you guys don't hear any echo anymore. I think I don't hear one either. So that is nice. Right on. Okay, so while we're waiting for Brother Gary, if anybody has questions, just put that in the chat in all capital letters, and my niece Rayana will be taking those for us tonight. Hopefully Gary will be joining us soon. Zen is continuing to work on his new book. I'm excited to read his newest poetry book. Also, there's a new item at sacredwordpublishing.com. You guys got to go check out the store. Justin just listed this, and he will be listing another poster that he and Kaylee have been working on. My daughter-in-law Kaylee and Justin put together this amazing poster with all of the Hebrew transliterations for each letter. It's a very nice chart. It's done on like a papyrus type looking background, and if you want to go check that out, that poster is awesome. There's also a poster that Justin is working on publishing coming up that will be on the genealogies of Adam, and I've read that list before of all of the meanings of the names and how they put together. When you put all those together, it comes out with this really amazing prophecy for Messiah. And then also the bloodlines of Cain will also be on that poster. So take a look at the Sacred Word Publishing store. I believe that Justin is doing orders, or at least pre-orders, for the Hebrew language poster that he and Kaylee just put together. It'll be on a nice, beautiful background and laminated as well, so it'll last a long time. It'll be an amazing addition to anything. If you're teaching Bible study, it's a great addition, so you can show everyone the Hebrew and Paleo Hebrew, as well as the script, as well as all the different pictograph type of little pictures that they used to use instead of what we have in modern Masoretic text today. So Noble helped to put that together also, to just kind of make sure it looked okay before they went to publish it. So it was like a group effort. It was really nice. Let's see. So we're still waiting for Gary. I'm just going to continue talking here. Let's see here. Oh, and Sherry has joined us as one of the moderators. Thank you, Sherry, for joining us. Thank you, all you guys, for being so patient while we're getting Gary in here, answer your questions. I've just began reading Gary's book for the second time, the part 2 for the second time. I've read the first book like 7 times and just used that information so many times to teach, and even some of the information when we were doing the House of David review. Oh, and speaking of that, House of David is supposed to have season 2 coming out October. Coming out in October. House of David season 2 will be airing, hopefully, and then we will continue doing our review of that and using the Bible and the extra biblicals to kind of back up the story, or to just see what Hollywood decided to embellish in the story, because they did quite a bit of that the first season. But overall, it was a wonderful depiction of the giants. I mean, it was amazing that Hollywood had actually even put quotes from the Book of Enoch in there. So if you have not watched House of David season 1, go and take a look at that. I believe it's on Amazon Prime. You can find that House of David season 1, and then you'll be prepared for House of David season 2 when we get that going. Okay. Alrighty, I'm just looking at the chat here to see if there's anything I need to address. But we do appreciate everyone here. We appreciate your support of the
Siri, text Lisa.
channel. For
what do you want to
Zen
say
Garcia.
to
Lisa?
Hey Lisa, I sent Gary the link. Have him check his email.
Some of Zen's older discussions and presentations of the
I sent Gary the link to have him check his email.
And just really amazing stuff here on this channel. You should go and search through the archives if you're looking for almost any topic. It would be awesome. I am going to, let's see. Okay, Zen. Yes, I will. I'm just sending messages to Gary via email as well. I don't have a contact number for him, so you can try to send another email and just let him know that you sent him the link. Okay, so I'm going to say Zen just sent you the link. Okay, hopefully we'll get him in here. So yeah, for Gary's Genesis 6 Conspiracy Book Part 2, I'm reading through it again now. I take it along with me so I can just do it in chunks, because it is a lot to digest. Every chapter is nice and short, so it's just enough to read one chapter, and then I usually take at least a day to think about that and to just try to process all the information, because there is so much that he has presented in that book that's just so valuable, especially when teaching or explaining. That question comes up so often in our Bible studies, especially when we have new people come in. They ask, well, how exactly did the giants appear after the flood? It says in Genesis 6 that there were giants on the earth in those days, and also after that. In chapter 2 of this Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, Gary addresses that very well. He talks about all the various second incursions that he's researched and that he believes could be a connection. But it is really amazing stuff. I'm so excited to be going through it for the next time already here. All right. And I see we got some questions coming in. Okay, Rayana is going to be taking your questions. Thank you again to my niece, Rayana, who is here in the chat. And I really appreciate you guys putting them in all capital letters. It just helps us to make sure that we will see your question. All right. So thank you. Thank you, Mark. And thank you so much, A Woman at the Well. Oh, Teza. Okay, right on. Thank you guys. You guys have always like really high level questions. I'm so impressed every time I see questions coming in here. Speaking of high level questions, we have our friend Daniel Sullivan, who is one of the moderators. If you have not checked out Gary's Facebook page, it's actually, he has his own Facebook page under his name, but he also has a group called Gary Wayne and the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Group. And so if you request to be a part of that, then you can, Gary goes in there quite a bit if there's questions that come up, and, you know, especially very quick questions that he can answer there. If you want a more in-depth answer, however, submit your question in here in the YouTube chat, and we will definitely make sure that your question is addressed. If not this time, for next month, we always forward whatever questions we have. If Gary is not able to get to all of them today, we will definitely put your question at the top of the list for next month, and it will be again the first Wednesday in September. I can't believe it's August already. It is just wild how fast things are going here. Tammy says that she is looking into reading a book called The Return of the Fallen Ones. Wow, that sounds like a very interesting read. Tammy, where do we find that book, or did you get that book already? If we can find that, that sounds like an amazing book too. And thank you so much. Rambit is also asking questions here. Also, for Rihanna, if you happen to get these people's questions that are coming in, if you could just put a little message in the chat that you got the questions to make sure that they know that you've seen it, that would be really helpful. Okay, so it looks like Gary should be en route, I guess, to joining us here in Discord, and look forward to hearing all of his wisdom as he answers all of your amazing questions that have run in here. Wow, I am looking at some of the questions he'll be answering today, and he is always extremely well prepared as well to answer them. He spends quite a bit of time making sure he covers all points when you guys ask a question. So I even put a question in there this time as well, because when I'm reading his book, I always keep a pencil and paper handy when I'm reading his book, because if I have a question about something he wrote, then I can always just write it down and submit it when we do Ask Me Anything. All right, I'm gonna check my email one more time. Let's see. Okay, thank you, Zen. I'm gonna try to send Gary this link also, just to make sure that he knows that you can just click on it and you can join us here in Discord. All right, I just sent Gary another message. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Zen. And it looks like Gary has joined us now, right on. Praise Yah, brother. We hear you, Gary. You want to try to say a few things to make sure your mic is working?
Hey, that worked this time.
Yay! Okay, right on. Yay! Okay, I'm so glad that you're able to find us here, Gary. It's like trying to go through a maze on the web, trying to find where we're at, right?
Yeah, well, at first I couldn't get into Discord for some reason. Then I got that done and got in, but then I couldn't find a way to a meeting. And then the link that came through didn't let me into Studio B. So the last link actually worked and everything popped up the way it should. So just gremlins tonight, I think.
Yeah. I think they know that you're going to be doing this Ask Me Anything, so they're like all on alert to see what you're going to share that they don't want you to share. I'm just joking. Okay, Gary, but we're so glad to have you here. If you could please let the listeners know where they can purchase your books. I've been kind of doing a little review as I'm reading through your book 2 for the second time. As you know, I've read through your book 1 about 7 times. And so if you could share that information, brother, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so I'll make this as quick as possible so we can get on with the show. So the best way to get a hold of me or find out about my books or to get a signed copy is go to Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6, the number 6conspiracy.com. And on the website, generous excerpt of all 84 chapters of book 2, all 98 chapters of book 1. If you want to get a signed copy, go over to the Buy Now page. There's multiple pages. If you live in the US, there's a US page for you. Canada, there's a Canada page. Anywhere else in the world, that's where you go to. If you're from Europe or Australia or wherever you are in the world outside of Canada and the US. And you can also link over to the Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, and BarnesandNoble.com to get the books there as well. You can also link over for the Kindle digital version of each books to Amazon and for the Audible versions. And if you wanted to get a hold of me and ask a question or ask for some additional information, go to contact the author on the website.
Right on. Okay, that was very quick, Gary. Let's move into the questions now. We have, as you know, you can see from the list, the first 3 questions were some that you weren't able to get to last month. So we will start with the first 3 questions are all from the same person, from Daniel Sullivan, who is, I was explaining, who runs one of the moderators on your Facebook page for Gary Wayne and the Genesis 6 conspiracy. The first question from Daniel is, if one head of the leopard-like beast in Daniel 7 verse 6 is the kingdom of Rome, what kingdoms are represented by the other 3 heads of the beast?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because that to help in understanding end time prophecy, and particularly with Daniel, we need to sort of understand that all of the prophetic passages in Daniel are all interrelated, and it's important to sort of look at that in that sort of context. So Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 9, Daniel 11, Daniel 12. You need to use them all, and they are working in a unique way where that those passages are going to be teed up by the previous prophecies. And there's going to be key phrases, there's going to be key terms, passages that are going to help you if you just sort of let the prophecy sort of read. So in Daniel 7:6, just in case people don't have that passage, it says, "After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings, a fowl, a beast, and also 4 heads." So there's 4 heads plus the first head, and dominion was given over it. And this is the empire of Greece that's going to come along, and it's important context for Daniel 8 when you find out who all of the heads are. So again, I'll just go back to, because Daniel is saying asking who are the other 3, but it's a beast like a leopard, and it has 4 wings of a fowl and a beast, and also 4 heads. And so I look at that as, you could look at it as 5 heads, or you could look at it as 4, but it all really means the same thing. So, and I'll explain that as I go into this. So when it says that there are 4 heads, these are the 4 dominions that are going to be talked about in Daniel 8. And for people who don't know history, is that the Greece Empire was established by Alexander, and after his sort of untimely death, so to speak, at a very young age, that empire is going to continue, but not as one empire. And so it's going to be like 4 empires. And so it's going to be split into the 4 notable ones, as it's talked about in Daniel 8. And that was made up of Rome as the one in the northeast, or northwest, so to speak, Greece, which would be the north east in this case, northwest for Rome. And then you would have the Middle East, like through Persia, the covenant land, and everything that he had kept on that. And then you have Egypt. And so these are the 4 kings that are going to come. So we get these as 4 heads as part of this beast empire that's going to continue. And we get them as the 4 kings or heads from the notable ones in Daniel 8:8. So when we understand this empire, we're going to get a passage in Daniel 8 that is going to lead us into the end time. And one of the key parts about understanding Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8 is that they go from, their prophecies have a transition, and it's an instant transition. So each of them go from the time of the Roman Empire into the end time and into the time of the Antichrist. And out of those 4 notable ones, at the end of that sort of reign, is the understanding of this one who comes that is a fierce a fierce king, and this is going to be the entrance of the Antichrist, where it does that sort of switch. And so we would see this empire as ruling as for individuals, for individual empires, but they do have a working relationship until Rome takes over. And Rome is going to become the next empire. So Rome actually extends out of Greece. And then when you look at the end time empire, the seventh empire, that's going to extend out of Rome as well. And from amongst those 10 kings, 10 toes, 10 horns, as the allegories are covering off for this 10 king empire of the end time, the little horn is going to grow up. That's going to be Antichrist. So we have to understand the details of each of those prophecies as they're coming down, because they're going to help to explain other aspects of Daniel's prophecy, and everything sort of falls in place once we understand that.
All right. Wow. Thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate that. I was taking notes here on the 4 notable ones. Okay, next question from Daniel Sullivan again. In your second book, you explain that the end is 7 years. But in the Olivet Discourse, Jesus says the end comes at the abomination and the completion of the gospel, the midpoint of the last 7 years. Is it both?
It actually is. It's not that it's a contradiction. It's that there's two different aspects. So if we go to Daniel 9:26, just before Daniel 9:27, obviously, but I make a distinction there because it's the setup to understand Daniel 9:27. And 9:27 has the covenant for 7 years that Antichrist is going to negotiate. And that starts the last 7 years. And in Daniel 9:26, it says twice where you have the end as it's described. That word end is the Hebrew word ketz, and it means, literally, the end time. But in that 7 years of the end, even in Daniel 9:27, it's split into two. So we get the first 3.5 years, and then we get the second 3.5 years after the abomination and after the sacrifices is going to be stopped. And Daniel 12 works that way too. It's playing off of that other half of the end. So when it's talking about the end, we need to understand which end is being talked about when the end is discussed. And so for the end, in terms of what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 24:13-14, you're going to have that end, and those who endure to the end are going to be saved. And then you're going to have the gospel that's preached to all of the earth before the end can come. And then you have the abomination, and then you have the start of the great tribulation of the world not seen since creation, or the great affliction, or the time of trial, or the time of trouble in Daniel 12:1. So if you were to put Revelation 3:10 and Daniel 12:1, Matthew 24:21, and Mark 13:19 together, you're going to see the language is identical. And that Revelation 3:10 is the hour of trial, which is going to be the time of Antichrist coming to power, just as this end is beginning that Jesus is talking about in Matthew and Mark and Luke is happening right after the abomination. That's the end, according to what Jesus talks about. So if we look at 1 Corinthians 15:20-24 and 23 and 24 for the passages, we get a resurrection sequence there of Christ, the first fruits, and then when he comes, those are his, and then the end will come when Jesus is going to reign. So that helps to define what's going on here. So what Jesus also said was, he said, go to Daniel to understand these events, these last 7 years, Daniel 9:27, and all the other passages that are going to work around those last 7 years. And that's very, very important. So once we get into Daniel 9:26, or I mean Daniel 9:27, at the time of the abomination, we are going to now, in other passages in that last 3.5 years that Daniel has split up into two according to the vision that he saw, the two halves. You have something that is called in Daniel 11 and in Daniel 8. And just let me take a step back. Daniel 11 is very, very important because you get from Daniel 9:21 to 9 to Daniel. I'm getting some feedback there. Daniel 11:21 to 31 are events of Antichrist rise in the first 3.5 years. And then Daniel 9:31 to 45 is the last 3.5 years. So when we look at Daniel 8, 9, in Daniel 8 and in Daniel 11, it's going to have a term that's called the appointed end. And that's the key distinction that we want to be talking about. So still getting a fair bit of feedback there. I don't know whether or not we can take care of that or not, but just thought I'd point that out. So that term appointed end is the Hebrew word moed, or moged, as it would have been in the older Hebrew, and it means appointed or an assembly. It's also used in the appointed feasts. So there's an end, and then there's an appointed end, moed ketz, as it's understood. And so that is the last 3.5 years. So at the appointed end, Antichrist is going to stop the sacrifice. He's going to set himself as being God in the temple, as in Daniel 11 is talking about, at the time of the appointed end, and that's the beginning. And then at the time of the appointed end, as you move on into Daniel 11, you're going to have a time where it's again the appointed end for him to go to the mountain of the assembly, to Mount Hermon for the last battle. So as we look at some of the terms, we get in Daniel 8:19, it says, this is going to be in the time of what is the last end, and it's in the time of the indignation, and here's the key word, at the appointed end. So again, at the time of that indignation, at the time of the abomination in the last 3.5 years, that's that appointed time. So in Daniel, and losing my voice here, so I'm just trying to get it back here as we're speaking, try and project it a little bit more. So yeah, this is the end that you have to do a distinguishing on the period. So the summary of it would be is the first ketz that we get in Daniel 9:26 is for the whole 7 years. But the time of Jacob's trouble starts in the time of trouble in Daniel 12. That's the Hebrew word sarah in both those cases, in Jeremiah 37 and Daniel 12:1. That's also the time of the resurrection for Daniel's people, so that a separate resurrection as well. And this is before the year of the Lord's wrath. So it starts in the Great Tribulation, and that word tribulation or affliction, that's the Greek cognate term for sarah or trouble. They both mean exactly the same thing. One of the difficulties we have is using a Greek manuscript for the New Testament and a Hebrew manuscript for the Old Testament, but we can look to words that are, and we can sort of rely on, particularly in prophecy where you can find them, that are clearly the same words used in the same application. And this is distinct from the words that would be used for wrath in both of the Testaments, of the New and the Old. So you can have 4 or 5 words used for vengeance, and indignation and wrath in the Old Testament. But in the New Testament, you're just going to get it down to two words, is thumas and orge. And they are describing different events. Tribulation, as the New Testament talks about to us, is for the saints. But the wrath is reserved for those who bring the tribulation on the saints. And it is those who run this world who bring tribulation on the saints. And so the wrath is reserved for them and for the ungodly in the year of the Lord's wrath. So we don't want to confuse the great tribulation with the year of the Lord's wrath. The year of the Lord's wrath happens in that time frame of the great tribulation, but it is for the time in the last 3.5 years for Israel and Judah to go through their time of trouble, but they're saved out of it before the year of the Lord's wrath. And those who are part of the church but weren't raptured, who are going to earn their immortality through martyrdom and refusing to worship Satan and Antichrist, in the last 3.5 years are taking the mark, and they're going to be seen resurrected in Revelation 15:3, and in and around the wrath being poured out as it's listed there in detail in 15:1 and 15:7, and before the wrath bowls are actually poured out in Revelation 16. So whether or not it is the saints that are raptured before the second Exodus, whether or not it is the people who are resurrected as part of the not taking the mark of the beast after rapture has happened, and for Israel and Judah, they will all be saved from this appointed end, which is the year of the Lord's wrath. And I always like to point out to people that we need to understand this in a little bit longer term than just the day of the Lord. That's part of that. So if you go, for example, into Isaiah 34:8, it's going to say something to the effect of the day of the Lord's vengeance, which is going to go back to one of the words that is used for wrath throughout the Bible and used interchangeably with vengeance as well, by the way. The year of the Lord's, it says in the day. Let me just see whether I can get this quote out of my mind right now. So you're going to have the year of the Lord's, the day of the Lord's vengeance in the year of the recompense for the sake of Israel. So just go look that up. You'll see what I'm saying. I kind of butchered the passage there to a certain degree. But understand that recompense is it's like in response for the tribulation that was given not just to Israel, but also to the church. And there's a tribulation of the saints that happens before the abomination in the first 3.5 years. So all of that is sort of kind of wrapped up into what's being talked about between the difference of the end time of the 7 years and then the appointed end. And that appointed end starts in its beginning in the time of the abomination. So when you see the tribulation of those days, just before you have the sign of Jesus being displayed in the gathering, you're going to see that it'll say in the tribulation of those days. And people will say, well, it's the great tribulation, and it's not this tribulation of the saints. It's actually both, because where that gathering of the elect to heaven is Mark 13:26-27 discusses. You have a tribulation of the saints that ends at the time of the abomination, and you're going to have the rapture just after that with the timing that Jesus places. And then you have also the beginning of the end, the beginning of the great tribulation of the world not seen at just after the abomination. So it's after the tribulation of the saints and at the beginning of the tribulation of the world. That's when that sign comes, according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
All right, Gary, thank you so much for that excellent answer to that kind of difficult question to me anyway. Something I think of when I think of those particular chapters in the book of Daniel is a supporting text that's in the Apocrypha that pretty much lines up. And I'm trying to remember the chapter, but it's in Second Esdras, which is pretty apocalyptic book as well, with the eagle. I'm not sure if you've dove into that book yet, but I really appreciate how it really just totally backs up everything, all the prophecies in Daniel and those chapters you mentioned. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't tend to quote Second Ezra, but I do have it in my hip pocket, and it just helps with the understanding, and it fits perfectly. But if people start to try and dissect and pull out certain verses this way and that way, you're not going to be able to figure out Second Ezra. You need Book of Daniel to understand Second Ezra, and then by doing that, it provides you additional details.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Thank you, Gary, for that answer. We have another question from Daniel Sullivan, kind of along these same lines, using the same book that's also his name. Uh, would you please take us through the part of Daniel 11 that relates to Antichrist, the end times, and the timeline?
Sure. So, and in Daniel 11, it's going to rely in certain passages on to Daniel 8, as I've talked about earlier. So in Daniel 8, 19, and 23, it's the latter time and the latter days. And that's Acherith. And it's when a fierce king is going to be coming to power. And that's the time of the end that we had just talked about. So that is going to be part of the details to understand some of the things that are going to be talked about in Daniel 11 as we get there. So in Daniel 11:21, a vile person is going to arise. And this vile person is this individual that, Daniel 8:6 is going to be talking about. 8:19 and 8:23 is talking about. And so if we look at what it's saying in those passages, it says that this is going to be the time of the end and the time of the indignation at the appointed end. That's where that Moed Ketz is going to be coming up. And this is what is understood as a fierce king. It is the one that is going to also magnify himself to be the Prince of Hosts in Daniel 11. So, and I'm pointing this out because a lot of people are going to say that when we get to the abomination part in Daniel 11:31, people are going to say, well, that was the abomination that happened in 200 BC with the Greek Empire, but it's not. That's why you have to understand the details. And Jesus would not be pointing out for us to go learn about the abomination and then throw us an abomination that would have happened that's recorded in the book of the Maccabees 200 years before that. It makes no sense. It's a prophecy. So as we look at moving forward with this, and he's going to be the mighty one who destroys the holy people. Again, all context for what Daniel 11, 21 through 45 is going to be talking about. And this vile person in Daniel 11:21 comes in peaceably. So where does that sort of fit in if we look at this as being the time of the end, the last 7 years? Well, he's going to be coming in peaceably with flatteries and promising peace. At the beginning in 11:21, this is the start of Daniel 9:27 with the peace covenant. And then as we move into Daniel 22, as this first 3.5 years is being waged, a large army is going to be destroyed and a prince of the covenant. And so this, I think, is going to be this very, very large war that is going to happen somewhere between 6 to 7 months before the midpoint of the last 7 years, up to, let's say, a year to a year and a half. This is the war of Revelation 9, the 200 million man war. And it's the same war that's described in Joel 1 and 2. And the individuals are described pretty much identically as described in Revelation 9 and in Joel 1 to 2. And I show that in a table in book 2 if people want to get a hold of the book and see how that sort of compares. And it's also, I think, the Ezekiel 38-39 war. And this is an army in Joel 1 and 2 that is the largest army that ever was. The 200 million man army that Revelation 9 talks about. So it's going to be probably bigger than the Armageddon war. And this is the war that Antichrist, as he's rising, because he's not Antichrist at this point, he's still rising amongst other Antichrists. One should expect the 10 kings that he rises amongst will be Antichrist-like figures. And so he's going to come to power at the time of this large army being destroyed before him, the Gog army. And he's going to be working with few people. And that few people is what is discussed in Revelation 17 with the 10 kings who hand their power over to Antichrist in the prophetic hour, the same hour of trial, the same hour, prophetic hour that Babylon is going to be destroyed, the same prophetic hour the two witnesses are killed at the end of their 3.5-year commission. The same prophetic hour that Jesus is coming for rapture. It's the symmetry of prophecy is amazing if you just sort of let it unfold. And then in Daniel, and we also see in Daniel 7 and 8, the little horn is going to rise amongst the 10 kings. Which again, this is the detail of the major events of Antichrist rising, beginning with the covenant and the other major things involving Antichrist coming to stopping the sacrifice and the abomination at the midpoint. So he comes to power with relatively few people. And in verse 24, he enters peaceably after war again to steal power. And then he redistributes wealth. So he's still rising. He's still building his popularity, and he's taking credit for this war that God had destroyed to protect Israel from being destroyed in the Gog Wars. You'll get those details. And then he's going to start the war with the king of the south to solidify power as he's starting to get closer to the midpoint. So that's why there has to be some time from the end of that war, and I look at the burial period and what needs to be done, and the details that Daniel 11 here is providing up to the midpoint, which is the abomination. And so the kings are going to plot an appointed end, but that's still to come. So they're trying to bring about the end before the appropriate time. And then in Daniel 11:28, then as he sets his heart against the Holy Covenant. So now he's going to turn against the Holy Covenant. And again, one of the details to remember about the first 3.5 years is that the Jewish people are going to be in a very favored position, doing sacrifices every day on a wing of the temple. A peace treaty that is guaranteeing their safety. And so Antichrist has to be sort of related with the power that's guaranteeing the safety, and then uses that as his sort of launching vehicle to say, hey, I won the war. I destroyed that army. That's the Armageddon that he needs for his credibility to be the counterfeit Messiah. And so he sets his heart against the Holy Covenant. So now it's going to start to turn into the Great Tribulation. And at the appointed time, at the beginning of the appointed time, at the beginning of the end, as I talked about in the other related passages in verses 29 to 30, He turns against the Holy Covenant using false knowledge. He is going to utilize knowledge that nobody else has. And it's going to be false knowledge, but it's going to be so persuasive that it's, again, setting himself up to be God in the temple, which is going to come next. But whatever knowledge that he uses and whatever speeches he's using, this is very preternatural, not to the level of God, but understand he's going to have all the power of Satan, as 2 Thessalonians 2 talks about. And so now comes the revealing and the showing of Antichrist that's in 2 Thessalonians 2. As you take that back to the Greek words and putting both of those together, this is showing who Antichrist is without any doubt. And that's when he crowns himself God in the temple. This is the thing that sets him apart from the Antichrist wannabes. And he commits the abomination starting in verse 31 and moves his armies there, just as in Luke 21. This is the time of armies coming into Jerusalem. This is the time of the abomination. And this is the time when Judah is going to flee to the wilderness. And they're going to be attacked and persecuted along the way, but God is going to take them using wings of eagles, which is a second Exodus reference to describe the first Exodus. And this is where Israel is going to be led to when Jesus is done with the rapture. He's going to lead the lost tribes and Judah around the world to meet Judah in the wilderness to be reconciled as part of the bride for the supper of the Lamb. And in Revelation 12, we have this turning against Judah as they're fleeing. And we know this is at the midpoint in Revelation 12 for the war in heaven when Michael is going to stand in Daniel 12:1 to fight in Revelation 12 against Satan. And we're timed that Israel, or not Israel, but Judah is going to be protected after fleeing the dragon for 3.5 years. So we know that's a midpoint event, and we know that this is the beginning of the time of Jacob's trouble. And it's going to continue right through to probably throughout the year of the Lord's favor, and then you have the year of the Lord's wrath. Some people put those years together, but I think there's enough detail there to say that each are a separate year. And then in Daniel 35, now begins the appointed end, where you have Moed Ketz, and it's the beginning of the last 7 years, just as Daniel 12:1 is understood in that same sort of context. And that's when the persecution of Israel and Judah is going to be taking place. And how does it happen to Israel? Well, they're going to be awakened in the first 3.5 years. And they're going to be put into jail, and they're going to be imprisoned. And then the breaker in Micah is going to break them out. That's Jesus, and he's going to lead them in Exodus. So after the abomination, at the start of the persecution, at the start of the great tribulation not seen since creation, at the time of the hour of trial, the time of trouble of Jacob in Jeremiah 37, the time of trouble in Daniel 12:1, this is the time that Antichrist shows who he is without any doubt. He exalts himself as God in the temple, just as Daniel 8 was telling us would happen here. This cannot be something that happened before Jesus made his first visit to the earth as Jesus. And then we have those passages of the religion that Antichrist is going to set up, because he has destroyed Babylon as his first thing of accepting power through a very few people and having power handed over to him by the 10 kings. And he's also going to overthrow 3 of those kings and replace them with 3 other kings. And this is the hour that Babylon is destroyed. So we get this religion that is going to rise after Babylon, which is a new religion that the forefathers didn't know. So something new with the worship of Antichrist as God and the worship of Satan. And so as we move through the passages 40 to 43, this is the time of the end, Ketz, when the king of the south is going to and the king of the north are going to betray Antichrist, and it's going to start these series of wars that is going to lead to the ultimate battle at Armageddon. So in 1145, Antichrist sees the tidings from the north. Isaiah 41:25. That's Jesus. Jesus in Isaiah 63 has started in Edom and Bozrah and has been moving up to the north through Edom, through Moab, through Ammon into Mount Hermon. And that's the tidings out of the north in Isaiah 41:25 and Daniel 11:45 that Antichrist sees. And so Antichrist, who is warring in the south with the king of the south at this time, is going to turn around and move up towards Mount Hermon, but on the west side of the Jordan River with Jesus on the east side of the Jordan River, and then they're going to meet at the mountain of assembly, the Har Moed, as Armageddon would be understood in the old in the old English with the G being pronounced, but with the advent of the Tiberian Hebrew, you have the IN that's just going to silence that G. So this is the time then that both are moving, and Antichrist is destroying many on the way. Getting a lot of feedback again.
Yeah, I'm
Just
sorry, Gary.
to let
I
you
don't.
know that. Yep.
Sorry about that, Gary. It's because I turned my mic back on. When I mute my mic,
Oh,
then you don't have the feedback. But I just wanted to let you know we are at
okay.
break now, and so
Yeah,
we'll
I'm
see
just
you.
going to finish up. And he plants his tents at Mount Hermon, and that's where Armageddon takes place.
Okay, thank you so much, Gary. We will see all you guys after break, and thank you again, Gary. We'll talk to you soon. Shalom. Okay, I believe that we are back here. I am trying out a headset, so hopefully you won't hear too much feedback. Gary, are you able to hear me? I'm just trying out this headset for the first time.
Crystal clear.
Right on, right on. Okay, and there's no feedback? Do you hear any feedback when you talk?
No feedback now.
Okay, right on. Okay, good. The headset, thank you so much, Monster 383 in the Discord chat. He's given me all kinds of ideas to try to make it easier so I can actually don't have to mute my mic when you talk, because I wanted to interject and comment on things you're saying, but I didn't want you to have the feedback during your amazing information that you're sharing, Gary. For those of you just joining us, we have Gary Wayne here with us. He is the author of two amazing books, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 1 and 2. And if you would like to read his work, you can go to his website to order. His books are also on Amazon. And if you'd like a signed copy, go to his website at, what is your website again, Gary? I'm sorry, my mind just went blank.
Genesis6conspiracy.com, the number 6conspiracy.com.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you guys in the chat for being patient. I know there was no sound during the commercial break, but that is for Studio B commercial for the Truth Frequency Radio, I believe it is. And so the people who are listening into the radio program are able to hear the commercials, but unfortunately we are not. So that's why it was just like dead silence. But anyway, I appreciate you submitting questions here in the chat. Your questions are being taken down by my niece who is in the chat, and she's helping me out today. Please put your questions for Gary in all capital letters. And if he is not able to get to your question today, we will definitely add it to the list for Gary's Ask Me Anything show, which is the first Wednesday of every month here on Zen Garcia YouTube channel. Gary, you're a busy guy too, though. I meant to address that when you first came in, but I noticed that you've still been doing quite a few shows. Are you still doing like 7 shows a week? Is that true?
Not during the summer, no, keeping it to about 3 a week. And probably we'll try and keep it to that going forward, just so I can do some other things. So, but yeah, very, 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 very busy schedule for shows right through to the end of the year.
Oh, for sure. And also too, I heard you mention in one of your latest live streams, I can't remember which one it was, that you were working on a third book.
Yeah, I am, and that's why I want to create a little bit of time so I can finish it. I got about 10 chapters done on it.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I started to do a complete rewrite. I had 300 pages in on the first try on the book, and it wasn't working. But after writing book 2, I kind of realized I needed to write book 2 before I could really write the book 2 that I had started and couldn't sort of make work. And so that's why I want to sort of at least sort of get it down and on paper and finish it off, because I think it's going to be good. It's going to be about second Exodus and the end time, and how the Holy Covenant is completed. I talk a lot about the bride of Israel and the bride of the church and how they come together. So I'm going to show those two parallel tracks as they come together in the end time.
Wow. So this is more like a prophetic type of book. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's going to spend a fair bit of time, though, in the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and with Israel. Sort of, I'm going to rebuild the components to, all the passages that go into the Holy Covenant, and cover off some of the important things in the Holy Covenant that's important from a prophetic sort of perspective, and the history of that. Violations of the covenant that ended up with the curses of the covenant, and how we have to go through the history that we've done because they broke the covenant and eventually ended up rejecting their Messiah, which was the ultimate form of violating the covenant, and thus the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. But they were given a choice to fulfill the covenant and have the blessings of the covenant, or violate the covenant and have the curses. So we're going through the curses. But either way, God is going to remember his covenant, and he's going to remember Israel by name and call them by name in the end time. He's going to reconcile them. As I say, it's a parallel track. So if once people sort of understand how to fit in the Old Testament prophecies through Israel with what's going on with the Gentiles and the church in the end time in the New Testament, everything starts to make sense.
Right on, right on. And that ultimate rejection of Messiah, my husband Noble actually has a really good teaching, proving using the Bible only that was equivalent to the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which was particularly for that generation, according to the words of Jesus himself in Scripture. So I thought that was kind of interesting because I always wondered what actually the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit equated to. But he proves it was the rejection of Messiah when he was there in person, right in front of them, and they just rejected him through the leadership, of course. But let's go on. Speaking of prophecy, we will move into the next question, which is from 3L Koyo, who is asking the Locust army and also the army from the bottomless pit. Will this be a literal locust and beast army, hybrids, or something else?
It's a really good question, and I think when we look at this army, it is something that is absolutely out of this world. So when we look at the term hybrid, that's not a term that would be out of place. And I think it's probably a very accurate term. There's a lot of speculation as to what these creatures are that are going to come out. And there's two armies that sort of need to be sort of understood here. And so when we look at the ones who come up out of the pit versus the 200 million man army, they both look like these kind of hybrids or something that has changed them. And I would look at, the pit prison as being something that's different than what makes up the 200 million man army. I think there's a relationship there, and I think the leadership might come from the from the angels that come up out of the pit prison, led by Abaddon and Apollyon. But I also think that these are angels nonetheless. They just don't seem to have that sort of appearance. And we have a couple of examples that I'll just sort of lay out as a premise for how we can get there to understand what these scorpion-like creatures, this and part of this locust, and again, not to mix this with the 200 million man army, because that's something else. But these are ones that come up out of the pit prison. So who's in the pit prison? You've got two types of beings in there. You've got angels and you've got demons. So some people might say, well, this is some form of demon. Well, I think that's more related to the Oiketarians, the dwelling place for spirits that are going to be provided for the demon spirits in the 200 million man army. Starting to get some feedback again. And so the locust army that comes up out of the pit prison, these are angels of some sort. And if we look at Satan, Halel, Ben Shakar, Halel, son of the morning, and probably known by a whole bunch of other names, he was degraded to Satan's status. And so we don't know exactly what he would have looked like, but we get these other images. And I don't know whether those other images, that have come down is what he actually looks like, but more in a goat sort of status and pattern, right? He's got cloven hooves. Well, that's rather interesting. And he's got these strange kind of horns, and he's related to this goat type of being. Well, I get the horns, I get the feet, with cherubims and seraphim and other types of angelic beings, but that's a degraded format from what he was. Degraded in power and in physical attributes, I think. And then you have the satyr beings, and Satan may be a form of satyr, but with different and additional traits. The satyr or the satyr angels, these are, goat gods like Azazel is depicted, and Bacchus, and Cernunnos, and so many other names. These and some of them are even kind of shown seemingly as part of the post-Diluvian pantheon and disappear. So these are degraded angels as we understand them in Isaiah 13 and Isaiah 34. One at the time of the destruction of Babylon with the first, and one at Armageddon on the second. And these are, when we look at Azazel out of the book of Enoch, he's a seraphim watcher, and now he's a goat god. So something happens, a degrading of that to satyr status, I think. And so if we have seraphims that are degraded to that, and now we have this description of these angels that are walking out, are they a different type of watcher that is described? And would they be more of a military or warrior type of watcher? And the one that sort of comes to mind might be the cherubim. And the cherubim, they're the ones that are set up outside the gates of Eden after Eve and Adam are ostracized, and they have these flaming swords. And cherubs and different various names for them, sphinxes around the ancient world. Cherubs would not only protect the throne rooms, just as the cherub are watchers around the throne room, but the throne room that they're protecting are of the fallen angels in polytheism. They would also protect the temples, and they would also protect the portals going into Sheol and Hades. So if you've had cherubim watchers that also rebelled, then this might be what is being represented as a degraded format of that cherubim that's depicted in Revelation 9. And so when we look at the description of these beings, you have descriptions that are very, very interesting. And there's a relationship to some creatures that are recorded all around the world in the ancient texts. And the most common one that you get the most information on are the Akrabulamu and the Gerbalu. And their descriptions are amazing, and they protected temples, and they protected palaces, they protected the portals in polytheism. And so we get these accounts, and they tend to be more post-Diluvian accounts. So after a degrading, just like we get degraded seraphims that are showing up after the flood as well for a short period of time. And in Revelation 9, you have crowns on their heads. So these are a crab bulamalu. And by the way, a crab is the same word that's used for a scorpion in Hebrew, which is the Hebrew word of crab. So there's a connection there in terms of how they're described by a name in Sumeria and the scorpion. And of course, we're getting, again, the Greek from the New Testament. It would have been interesting to see how they would have been described coming out of the Hebrew words and what those Hebrew words would have been. But we only have the Greek to work with, so we can only speculate on that. They also have in Revelation 9 long hair like women. Well, so do the Akrababalu. They have long hair and beards. They have faces of men. Cherubim have faces of men as well, and so do the Krababalu with beards. They
Wow.
have teeth like lions. Yeah.
Can
They
you
have
say that word
teeth-like
again?
lines.
In the chat, everyone's wondering. That's like a mouthful. A crabulamalu? Where did you even find that, Gary? I've never heard of that before.
Well, you can find it in my book 2. It's spelled
Okay.
AQ
Okay.
AQRABUL.
Okay.
No, that's UAL. So AQRABUALMELU.
Crabulamalu. Whoa. Okay, that's unreal. And they match the description of Revelation like perfectly. Okay, continue. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. So we don't get the descriptions of the teeth with the Krabulamu. And again, you'll get your tongue tied in knots if you say that word too often. They have the shape. They're described as shapes of locusts. These locusts were horse-like was the shape in Revelation 9. Their torsos for the Girdabulu or the Krabulamu have horse-like torsos. Revelation 9, they have breastplates of iron made for battle. And the Sumerian ones have rib-like armor. You have large thundering wings in Revelation 9. You have the same large wings with the Sumerian scorpion beings. And they have tails and stingers like scorpions in Revelation 9. And these are described as having in Sumerian the Krabulamu, as the scorpion as having scorpion tails with stingers raining venom. So you can't get much more closer of a description of what's coming out. These are the fallen ones. These are fallen watchers, I think. And I think probably fallen cherubim.
Yeah, because that I just typed that word out in the chat so people could see it, and it does look like cherub is in there, which is the shoresh or the root of cherubim. You know,
Yeah.
it's perfect. Wow, that's a great find. I was wondering what those creatures, where if we'd seen these before, if they're in any culture, and you nailed it. Okay, continue, Gary. Sorry about that.
So that's who I think is coming out. And I mean, they're going to absolutely cause untold grief and horror. They're going to sting people for 5 months.
Wow.
And people aren't going to die. So people are going to ask for death, but it's not going to come. So better hope that you have, if we're still here, better hope we have a seal of it's on our forehead to be protected, because those are the only ones who are going to be protected from these things.
Wow. Okay, that brings everything to light for sure. And I'm so sorry for those of you who hear the planes going by. We have like a military plane flyby over our house every day at about 3:13 p.m. here. So sorry about that. We got military bases all around us here. Okay, continue, Gary. Sorry. Are you ready for the next question? I'd love to
I
hear more
am.
about those
Next
creatures
question, yeah.
eventually. All right, next question is from Donna Smith, who is in the chat. She is asking, let's see. Can you please list similarities that come to mind between Lord of the Rings and spurious bloodlines?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we have all of these different types of beings that are in Lord of the Rings. So there's a lot more going on than just sort of giants and our giants embedded into the Lord of the Rings. I think I make a very good case in book 1 that the Tuatha De Danann, the Scythians, the Indo-Aryans, the Detanu of the Ugaritic texts, also known, all the same names for the same people, also known as the Sidhe or the Shay or the Seed, Sidhe. It has a incredibly numerous amount of ways of pronouncing that word. Also known as we would understand it as a shade, Shade. That's talked about as these evil spirits in the Old Testament. So if you look at a painting called The Riders of the Shay, or The Riders of the Sidhe, or The Riders of the Seed, Sidhe, if somebody Googles the riders of that, the riders of the Shay, you're going to see depictions of Tuatha De Danann, fairy folks, fairy people that look identical to the white elves in The Lord of the Rings. So the elves are the giants, and they're depicted as, very pale skin, but in different colors of hair, and I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. But you have all sorts of other people that are in there, like the hobbits, for example, and the dwarves. These are elementals. They're part of the visible hierarchy, but just at a lower level than the white elves. And white elves are different than dark elves. Dark elves are part of the elementals in the ugly group, along with like the gnomes and the trolls. So, and there's 4 different groups of elementals. I won't get into all of that. That's a whole different topic on itself. But we can look at these Tuatha De Danann as basically the house of dragon, or the house of the fairy. Matriarchal for the fairy, dragon for the patriarchal sort of bloodline. And that these were considered as nearly immortal in the lore of the Lord of the Rings, as demigods. Originally, they had immortal lives in a physical body. Then it was reduced to 120 years, and then they worked actively to try and extend those lives going forward. So we get a lot of names that are kind of compounded word for names, but there's some commonalities in a lot of the names. So you get like the 2 letters EL in a number of the names. And you would have like Galadriel or Glorfindel. And then Glorfindel with the EL at the end, you also have FIN that's in there. So that's part of the compounding words. And Finn, in the language of the Tuatha De Danann of the British Isles, Finn means fair, as in fair skin, as in fairy folk. It's also known as Vind or Vindos in Gaul, meaning and again for Tuatha De Danann, Celtic people intermixed with them are also fair. And just as you have Guinevere, and also known as Finnabair in Irish, Guinevere would be Welsh, and it basically means white phantom. And
Wow.
Guinevere was the wife of King Arthur, son of Uther Pendragon. So
Oh
you
my
have
God.
this fairy queen with this dragon king, right? So understand how these things are worked into the various sort of names. So you don't get direct names that you could take to sort of bloodlines, but these were the high elves of the House of Shay, and they're the children of Iluvatar, because they're demigods, right? So this is the god Iluvatar, starting with Il. Il is a transliteration in Mesopotamia for El, for a god or an angel, Il. So you might also see it as ILU, as it's used in Iluvatar. But they've done that to do a combination compound word for this god, where you have ILU. It just as easily be ILA to get the same thing, but they wanted to use that variation of transliterated god or angel with avatar.
Ah, I see. Wow.
Yeah. And
It's all
angels are the
coming together.
avatar, and their hosts are avatara, right? So you have these
Right.
things that are embedded into the Lord of the Rings. Now they have different groups of elves, 3 or 4, depending on how you want to sort of divide that up. And what's interesting is that you have Noldar, which have dark hair for the most part, and you have Vanyar, which has golden hair and fair skin. And by the way, the dark-haired Noldorns have fair skin as well. And then you have Sinvar, which are sort of more of gray elves, and they have dark and silver hair. So when you see in the House of Dragon all of these different people, whatever skin color they have this not blonde hair, not silver hair, but kind of a bleached hair. I think that's what they're representing in that one. And then you have a group that's rare. And in the occult of the royales, red hair is the most desired trait, and more of a strawberry blonde hair. So a lighter, in between red and gold, right? So, or a combination of red and gold, or a combination of red and silver, however they get there with it. And that's the Sylvan. And there's very few of them named, but there are some of them. And some of them are mixed in with the dark-haired ones. So they are probably in there as just putting a place for them, because when you look at what Tolkien is doing, he comes from Norway originally with his ancestors, and from the Tolk family that goes back and taking their bloodlines all the way back to Odin. So he's got that Norse blonde-haired sort of fairy mythos that he's put into the Lord of the Rings versus more of the Celtic one. So in the Celtic, you would have more of the red hair variety. Or if you were to go in more into the old Tartarian sort of empire of the Ukraine and Russia and Mongolians, it'd be more of the red hair as well. So you have those different groups. And what's interesting about that, this kind of matches up to the different types of giants that we see, that you have within the Tuatha De Danann, the red hair, hazel eyes, and the blonde hair and the blue eyes. And then you have watchers like the Cherubim, who likely produced offspring as well, where the dark-haired ones come from. So when you see, and these ones are also associated with the Akrabomalu as the third group, which is another connection back to the Cherubim and what we just talked about, is when you see depictions in Sumeria of watchers doing this ritual, and one has this head of a human, black curly beard, black hair with wings, that looks exactly like the faces on an Akrabomalu. And then you also have the same depiction where you have a bird head. And the bird is also, as in the eagle, is one of the faces of a cherubim as well, because they have 4 different faces. Right. So the dark-haired ones could come from the human head, which now why you have Gilgamesh being depicted with dark hair, right? And black curly beard. And then you also have, the red-haired ones and the red-haired ones and the blonde-haired ones. Where I haven't really worked in is why there's this mythos of this silver-haired ones. I haven't figured that part out in anything that I can take it sort of to biblically, but understand if it's in their writings, in their entertainment, then there's some history to that. Might be a different type of watcher.
Oh, definitely. In fact, I'm rapidly taking notes as you're dictating all this, Gary. And I've heard you present it, but I'm not sure as in quite as much detail on one of your live streams you've done in the last couple months. But I wanted to just point out. I mean, I see all the connections with all the EL symbology, how they change it to IL sometimes, or AL to try to throw us off or something. But one of the things that I noticed when you talked about that Glorfindel, I'm trying to remember which character that is in Lord of the Rings, but that you said that they're fair and that they're offspring of someone Vindos, Vindos. Is that correct? Or Findos?
Yes.
Okay. So
yes, Finn, Finn, or Vindos. Yes.
Vindos. So you know what that reminds me of? Like, you know how they like to the fallen. We're basically using fallen angel tech as we speak right now to just even air this program.
Yes.
But that sounds very suspiciously like Windows. You know, like the Windows program, the Windows, the Findos, the Windows. Like it seems like that, and how they kind of mock us using the apple icon, that even though we know it probably was not an apple that was on the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but like even Windows, I mean, that English word, we know that English was created by these royals, right? So they want to try to put as much of their like symbology and their ancestors in us in our daily speech as possible. So what do you think? Do you think that they might have taken that word from this particular ancestor of that Glorfindel, the Findos?
Possibly. I mean, you just can't sort of ignore how these names sort of work in there. I mean, you have Finn right in there,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Finn meaning fair,
Findos.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they have some other names like Finway or Finwee, depending on how you want to pronounce that. So look for Vin, look for Finn, and look for EL in most of the names. Like you have Elrond,
right,
or Elrond. I mean you couldn't get much closer than Elion, right?
right,
Or
right,
Ron can also be understood as a ruler
right,
in
exactly. And just
ancient
like the
Indo-Aryan. So
like the Don, I think Don or Don is another form of like the tribe of Dan,
uh,
which we know it mingled with the Nephilim really early on. I think you actually taught me that about how
yep,
the Dan mark, they put their mark on everything through the names, like the Danube, the
yep.
London, they're all over the place. Donald Trump, like the Don, whatever you want to call him, the Golden Dawn. There's so much symbology. Also too, my son was reading a series. It's this for children too. He was like 10 years old, and he started reading this children's series called The Pendragon. I never understood that till I started following your work, Gary. I appreciate that now. That's actually like another name for King Arthur. Is that what you just said? The Dragon King
Well, it's a title.
title.
Pendragon is chief. Chief dragon, right?
Chief
So,
Dragon. Oh my goodness.
it's an yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and these were overlords.
Right.
These were
Right.
uber lords. These were
Uber.
Oberon as in Midsummer's Night Dream, King of the Fairies. And then you have Overon with a V there, and Ron. These are overrulers, right? Just
Oh
as you
my
have
goodness.
Ron that was in that name that we talked, right? So it's just
Right.
it's
Yeah. It's
we swim in their
even
language.
Yeah,
So
even Uber. They
yeah,
even created Uber. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's move on to the next question because I could ask you questions all night and we will never get to the other people. So maybe the next one is from. Are you finished with the Lord of the Rings question, Gary? Do you have anything else you want to
sure.
share?
Yep.
Okay, let's go on to
No, I
mass
think we
form.
covered enough because you could go on for a very long period of time on
Oh yeah, we
Lord
could
of the
talk for
Rings. So
hours. We could talk for hours about Lord of the Rings. I never actually saw Lord of the Rings until it came out like 5 years later, and then my husband and my son are such huge fans. I've seen it so many times. I like have many lines
yeah.
memorized in that series. Okay,
Oh,
so mass. Oh, go
one
ahead.
other thing. One other thing that I know you'll be personally interested in that name Guinevere.
Mm.
Yeah, the last syllable is ver, um, and again, we're told it's a white phantom, and that the Anjou go back to the house of Ver
Oh my
as
gosh.
the senior older house. Yeah.
Wow. And I also, speaking of that particular name, the modern way to say that Guinevere is Jennifer. So they've even inserted that into like extremely common name.
Yes.
All right, they just changed the letters a bit. Same sound. Okay, next question here. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
and in its original form, it would be pronounced with a Y. Both versions.
Oh, yes, Yennefer. Yennefer. Okay, got it. All right, mass form is asking, can fallen angels switch back and forth to spirit form easily from human form?
I think originally that was the case, that they could do it at will, um, and change forms. And we get accounts of gods even after the flood with the offspring gods like Zeus could take the form of a wolf, right? And other forms as well. So I think there was almost sort of unlimited ability to create that dwelling place for their spirit as they chose. But I think as they violated the laws of creation, you have a reeling back of the power of the offspring gods that take over for the parent gods. And again, for people who may not have heard me before talk about this, parent gods ruled before the flood. So in the Greek pantheon, we could look at Kronos or as being the parent god. Zeus is the offspring god who rules after the flood. In biblically, so that you have a biblical basis for that, Baal is the offspring god, and of the Baalim gods that rules from the Council of the Gods in Mount Hermon, and El is the parent god. So they disappear for violating the laws of creation and creating giants and other horrible things, just as the parent gods did before the flood, and they go to the pit prison as well. And I think there's another reduction of their capabilities because we don't have fallen angels walking amongst us anymore. And if they are, maybe there's more rules and restrictions, but I don't think they have that capabilities. Or if they have that capability still, the consequences are probably more instantaneously to go to the pit prison. So they would not do that.
Yeah.
This is my speculation, obviously, but because they stay as the invisible ones and work through the visible ones to run this world, their offspring, I think that goes to show that they can't do it at will, or they're just not wanting to use it because of the consequences. But I do think the closer we get to the last 7 years, they're going to say the end is coming at the end of that last 7 years. So we're going to do what we want because the time is so short that who cares? And I think that's why Alice Bailey talked about, and the Gnostics talk about 2025 is the sort of the beginning of the age of Lord Maitreya, their Antichrist figure. They would call it their Messiah. But this is the age of what they call the externalization of the hierarchy. So at some point in time in the not too distant future, we may see them taking physical form again. And I think that's pretty clear as to what's going on in the last 7 years. And if it doesn't happen before that, it certainly happens by the time of the pit prison when one's come out of there. And we certainly will have all of the fallen angels thrown down to the earth for the last 3.5 years in the war in heaven. So I think the simple answer is at one time they could do it at will. I still think they have the capability, but I think there's consequences or restrictions that have been put on.
Along the same lines, Gary, I just had a thought. What about not fallen angels, but what about heavenly angels? They're able to change their form as well. Do you believe that they still do that even in these days?
Well, we do. Well, in the New Testament, we're told to be in Hebrews 13 to be kind to strangers,
Right.
lest we come across an angel unaware. So I think that that's still definitely capable. You have angels appearing with Jehovah the Elohim to Abraham just before the two go on to Sodom. So we have Old Testament ones, and we have angels appearing in the New Testament and seemingly in physical form. So it's throughout the Bible that angels can take different forms. And I think we have enough there to say that yes, angels working on God's behalf are still here working. We just don't recognize them. But I don't believe that the fallen angels are there interacting in that physical form because they're. I mean, I might be going out too far on a limb to say that sort of carte blanche, but when we understand fallen angels, they rule this world. So
Hmm.
if the consequence or the restriction wasn't there, they would be taking physical form and they would make their presence known.
Right. The risk is just too great because they did that a lot before the flood, I'm sure. But now, yeah. And in fact, I was going to mention because I believe I've had an in-person contact with an angel before. Just real quick, my daughter and I were driving in Los Angeles. We got a flat tire going like 70 miles an hour on the freeway. We took the nearest exit, which happened to be in Compton, which is not the greatest part of Los Angeles. We were praying like the whole time because neither one of us know how to change a tire. we pulled into a like kind of empty parking lot of a Target and got out, and I was like almost I was kind of frantic because it was a horrible neighborhood to be in. And we started just kind of look at the tire and try to get the jack out of the trunk and try to figure out what was going on. And this kind of young college looking age guy appeared with a backpack, and then we both freaked out because we didn't want to have like a guy helping us just randomly. But he just smiled. He said, "Hey, you guys got a flat tire? Let me change it for you." So we changed it, and he had appeared out of nowhere. Like there was nobody in the parking lot when we pulled into it. And then he changed it, no problem, just smiling and everything the whole time. And I said I went into the car to get some money out of my bag to give it to him. And my daughter was trying to help me find my purse, and it was like less than a minute. We turned around and he was gone. There's nowhere to be seen. Like he could not have left that parking lot that fast without us seeing him. So, I believe that they do come and they do help the people of the Most High, which is so it kind of gives me chicken skin to just talk about it. Have you ever had an encounter like with an angel or someone you believe could have been one?
I wouldn't say that I would understood it as seeing an individual, but I was on a trip with my brother when I was 16, and it was we were coming back from Edmonton to my hometown, and it was very cold, icy, and um, I was a very inexperienced driver, and we started to do 360s, going 60 miles
Oh,
an hour
wow.
with semi coming at us.
Oh my
And
gosh.
all of a sudden, something grabbed my arm, went down, and took me in instantly into the ditch. I was able to get control of the vehicle, um, to stop spinning and go into one direction into the ditch, back out of the ditch after the semi had gone by, and then back on the road going straight. And my brother said, "How did you do that?" I said, "I didn't." It wasn't
Wow.
me.
Wow.
So
See,
nothing that I saw, but you just can't explain how that happens.
oh yeah, you experienced that for sure. Wow, that's cool. Thank you for sharing that, Gary. Next question from Gold Sigin. They're asking, please explain what portals CERN is trying to open.
Yeah, I think when we look at the portals, there's portal is a standard doctrine in polytheism, and that the gods would go back between these portals. And Baal, for example, at the gateway to Hades at the foot of Mount Hermon, he would go back and forth every day between Earth and Hades and Sheol to, rule over both of his kingdoms. And at Gilgal Raphaim at Mount Hermon as well, there's like 100 dolmens or portals. Dolmen means a portal, and a fairy portal to boot, to sort of connect back to what we're talking about with the Tuatha De Danann and Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And it's also doctrine within the seven sciences. So this is ancient technology that was there that seemingly had the ability to access portals. And so it was either through technology or words or rituals or just knowing where to go or whatever energy it takes. So when we see CERN, which is an acronym that they picked that is absolutely bizarre when you think about it, because when we look at Azazel, he was degraded to a satyr god with horns, a horn god.
Mm-hmm.
And in Indo-Aryan, CERN or KERN, you hear it pronounced with a soft C or a hard K, meant horn-headed god.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And that's what they decided to name this thing, using this very unique European acronym. And it's
Oh my
like,
goodness.
no, yeah. And so, how is this sort of related? Well, Azazel is the leader of the Watchers in the book of Enoch, that the secret societies and Gnostics both value, venerate, worship the knowledge of the gods in their knowledge-based religion. Azazel is put in another dimension in the pit prison. They would love to go in and get him out.
I bet.
and all the other angels, and that in the end time there's going to be this key that an angel is going to take out and open it. In the occult, in geomancy, in the technology aspect of geomancy, it's used as a key to access different dimensions.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
you see this sort of, yeah, you see this relationship. And the other thing that they probably want to do is they want to be able to access, using this technology, a portal into heaven. Why? So that they can do what Satan did once before, is tried to raise his throne up to heaven to be like God, which is going to happen again in the last 7 years with the War of Heaven in Revelation 12, and the pit prison is also going to be open in Revelation 9. So what are they trying to do? I think those are their two primary targets. There may be portals to other locations that they also want to do, but this will be their primary focus in my understanding.
There are just too many similarities with how they name these things. I just thought of something. The word apple, it's very close to apo, which in Tagalog, which is the national language of the Philippines, means father, or it's a kind of a derivation of aba or aba, apo. And I think that they purposely chose that a derivation of that word to name the apple just to kind of mock us all, like you don't even realize what you're saying. And then that's like this huge computer company now.
Well, well, it's
Yeah.
probably multiple meanings. I mean, in the occult, I mean, the apple is the fruit that comes from the tree of good and evil. That's their
Right.
allegory
And
for it.
in the cult, yes, exactly. Wow.
And the golden
Okay.
apples
The golden
represents
apple.
that lost knowledge. So,
That's right. That's right. The golden. Wow. There's so much. There's so many things that we cannot see until we actually have eyes to see, right? It's just amazing.
yeah,
Okay.
and we can't not notice the bite taken out of the apple for Apple computing. That's the bite that Eve first took.
Yes, yes, exactly. Exactly. Unless you go into the book of Enoch and you read about what the fruit of the knowledge of the good and evil actually look like, according to the book of First Enoch, it looked like the grapes on a vine, but it was on a tree. And so we need to look for a tree that
Yeah,
has fruit that looks like grapes, clusters of grapes, I guess. Speaking of, okay, oh, I
yeah.
have the last question here, and then if we do have time, we do have another question about the book of Enoch for you. But my question is, and this is because I've been studying genealogies, what role did Kainan of Seth, and this is in Genesis genealogy, have in intermingling with the bloodline of Cain?
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of question. Um, and we can't fully resolve it because we don't get enough information. But when we look at Genesis 4:19, it says Lamech took two wives,
Right.
and this is Lamech of the Cain line.
Mm-hmm.
And took, as we take that back to the Hebrew, means to seize. Can mean to acquire, but also to snatch and to capture. And so that is the same sort of language that is used in Genesis 6, where the fallen angels took anybody they chose, right, for wives.
Yes.
So it seems like there's something going on in the language there that is being signaled to us, but that's kind of where it dries up in the book of Genesis. Now, if you start to piece in a little bit more information, you have Josephus that writes about the Seth line, and he says it was totally corrupted by the sixth generation, and that the sixth generation, as we understand it, would be the generation of Jared. In the generation that the giants were created in 6:6 and 106:13 in the book of Enoch.
Okay.
And so something else is going on in this because Canaan is the fourth generation. So, but then we get the the offspring of Lamech that is going to turn into Tubal-Cain and Nama and Jubal. And so these are four infamous people that are major patriarchs, as with Lamech of the Cain line, as is Enoch of the Cain line, in terms of the Gnostics and the secret societies. So there's something going on there. So the fifth generation would be the generation of the daughters of Zillah and Ada. So, and it all comes together with this complete sort of corruption of the Sethite line, according to Josephus, in the sixth generation. So I'm looking at the details and saying, but biblically we don't get any more of it, but there's something there to say that there's a cross-pollination of the two lines, that Lamech kidnaps some daughters of people, but we don't get told from who. But in the book of Yashar, where we get some sense that makes out of this, and I'm very careful on what I like to use out of the book of Yashar because of all of the Jewish mysticism and things that are in there. We don't have the full original ones, so I try and be careful with it. In Yashar 2:17, it's talking about Lamech, the son of Methuselah. This is from the Cain line. And remember, the names all sound familiar. And there is a Lamech in the
Oh yeah.
in
They're
the
just like Enoch the
Jared
evil and
line, like
Enoch the
Enoch.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it says became related to Canaan or Kenan, Kenan in some the more modern translations. It's the same Hebrew word. It says that he became related to Canaan by marriage. He took his two daughters for his wives. And Ada conceived and bare a son to Lamech, and the other one is Zillah. So there you have. There it is, yeah. And so this is the generation in verse 19 where it says, "For in those days the sons of men began to trespass against God and to transgress the commandments which he commanded to Adam to be fruitful and multiply." So you get more information that's coming, but that's why I go fourth, fifth, and sixth generation. And now I see what Josephus might be sort of talking about when I put all of that together. But that's where the information ends, and we don't get a whole lot more than what's in the book of Yashar.
Oh, thank you so much
But
for
the
that,
Bible
Gary.
does point. But the Bible is pointing something is going on there with the language, as Lamech took two wives.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I never noticed that word took means like there's more hidden meaning in there because no one else says that they took wives. We don't hear that, like you said, except for the Watchers. So that would totally make sense that that's where the two bloodlines would have been mingled. And yeah, so yeah, that totally makes sense. And then I know you go into great detail on the offspring, the four offspring of these two wives with Lamech, and I believe that's in your book one. Book one. It has all of that. So really appreciate that information. We are at the end of our show, just in time. I was going to ask you one more question, but we're not going to have time for that. We'll get to that next time. We appreciate everyone in the chat. Thank you guys for all participating. Thank you for submitting your questions. Thank you to my niece for taking the questions, taking them down for me. Thank you also to all the moderators. And we appreciate you, Gary, so much. Thank you for taking the time out to come and just answer questions for us. And it's such a gift to just be able to ask you anything. And you always give like very sufficient resources as where you're finding the information, so we can look this up on our own also. But anyway, with that, we are at the end, and thank you to Zen Garcia also, brother, for hosting this show and for continuing to spread truth wherever we go. And we just wanted to end the show here, and we will look forward to next month's Ask Me Anything, the first Wednesday of September. So we'll see you all then, and shalom.